Welcome to Prepare the Way, a show dedicated to all matters related to the new evangelization. I am your host, Martha Fernández-Sardina, Director of the Office for Evangelization of the Archdiocese of San Antonio and of Prepare the Way Enterprises, a ministry dedicated to helping Catholics become everyday evangelized evangelizers. Today I have the privilege of being at the studios of Fransican University of Steubenville in Ohio, a vibrantly Catholic university that has made a difference in the lives of many young men and women. My guest today is a very special guest. It is Father Michael Scanlan, TOR, Third Order Regular, a Franciscan, who was for many years the president of Franciscan University, turned the place around, and most recently has been the chancellor of the university and is enjoying soon his retirement. Welcome, Father Mike.
Thank you, Martha.
It's a pleasure to have you with us. You are a legend. You did great things on this university campus. What did you do to this place? It was one way, then you came along back in the, 50s or 60s, and turned it around. Tell us a quick story of what happened
1974
here.
is
74,
when I came
there you go.
As president. What I did was pray hard. The people who monitored my life at that time said, you frequently would spend the first 3 hours of the workday praying somewhere before you'd come, because I just wanted what God wanted, and I wanted to make sure that what we were doing had a solid spiritual foundation.
Now, it was a Catholic Franciscan university, but in those days, the 70s, there were a lot of things that were not so well on Catholic college campuses. What was so necessary that you were praying so hard? What were you wanting to change?
Well, it's the wave across Catholic education had been to a more secular education. And it was started by I forget who put out the poll numbers right now, but they said that Catholic colleges and universities didn't rank up with the secular ones. And they gave all these reasons, and so there was a meeting of Catholic educators, and they started to incorporate the things that were highly rated, the Ivy League principles of Harvard, Yale, Princeton. Those they started to go that direction to get that higher rating academically, and in the process, the Catholic identity and the spiritual environment very much got diluted as they went for the academic. And I understood that. I had lived through it, so it wasn't that I was saying, oh, this was terrible. I'm just saying that's not who we are. We got to truly be Franciscan Catholic Christian in what we do throughout.
Unless anyone understand that you were not for academic excellence, you yourself are a graduate from one of those Ivy League schools.
Yes, I graduated from Harvard Law School, and I was in the honors program there. And I did start when I was academic dean here, the honors program here, to really challenge the critical thinking, so that when I was named president, the faculty here said, oh, here we go again, academic standards, we're all going to be challenged to raise the academics. And they were surprised that my main thrust was to create a really spiritual environment, a place that was truly Catholic in both its daily life as well as its teaching.
The sort of motto for the universities these days is academic excellence, academically excellent and passionately Catholic. And that's what you've brought about. What did you put in place then? You would pray these 3 hours or so a day. What did the Lord inspire you to do that turned this place around into what it is today?
Yeah, academically, we started a theology major. And I personally recruited people who were not only good teachers and Orthodox Catholics, but who were fervent, alive with the Spirit. And so I recruited, because we didn't have one full-time theology teacher when I came. And that turned out to be okay, because I could bring in this whole new group. and make theology the most exciting discipline on campus until it became the major and the biggest major at the university, and both undergraduate and graduate. And we have the largest theology program in the country now. So that was key academically. But we needed also to create a real Christian environment for student life. And we did that by creating households. I made it obligatory for everyone to be part of a household. They could choose who they wanted the rest, but the household had to have a spiritual component to it, had to gather to pray, had to share life, had to have some outreach like Mass and Rosary and things of this nature. And so we created that system of small groups of mutual support, but faith-based. And we provided advisors for them. We had taken over the largest building on campus, which had been an empty dorm, and invited in priests and sisters, laymen, laywomen who were fervent to live there, and then they became the evangelizers and the moderators of all these other groups and households.
So you were building the student life and the spiritual life of the students through these groups of men or women who were these little fraternities of communities, fraternal communities of men and women supporting one another, praying together. Did the students like it at first? You say it was mandatory.
Well, when I first announced it, that it would be obligatory for everyone to join one by the following September, or they wouldn't be welcome back. First, there was all sorts of protests and
I would imagine.
thinking the troubadour that nobody would come back. Well, they all came back. And they found a new level of bonding with their fellow students through these households. And the households, while they needed a faith dimension, they could sponsor athletic teams, they could have social events, they could do different things, because we wanted their whole life enriched, but we wanted a spiritual anchor to it.
Father, I can imagine that once the parents of these students caught on to what you were doing, they must have been relieved to know that your child was sent to college. And every parent out there knows that they're exposed. When you go to college, we're exposed to all kinds of ideas and ideologies and promiscuity. What a consolation to know that your son, your daughter is in a strong group, a fellowship, so to speak, where you can have sports and you can have spiritual and you can have fellowship and help one another study and excel as a student.
Right. It was very interesting that while the students, when I first announced it, were saying we're not coming back, or they all came back. And I think parents had something to do with that being a good idea. But I just was so convinced. I had lived the fraternity life in college and law school, and I knew what needs were fulfilled in that, and I knew we could fulfill them in another way.
You also were in the Air Force, weren't you?
Yes.
So you also know what discipline and what an organized life and what bonding can do for a person's life. So I imagine that may have played a role also in creating spiritual disciplines, Mass, confession, spiritual direction, Rosary.
Yes, we taught many times, if you want to be a disciple of Jesus Christ, then you need a discipline. That's where the word comes from, acting like a disciple. And so that requires commitments. And you need the prayer commitment every day, the spiritual reading, you need the sacraments. These have to be part of your discipline. And in your household, you're accountable to one another. But you also get support to go with one another for these things. And I really saw that discipline as creating freedom to grow.
So often people think, disciplines, and even the church, she imposes so many rules on us. But discipline gives us freedom, you say.
Oh, yes. look at what happens when you discipline your body, when you exercise daily, when you do, everything gets better and you're accomplishing more. And that works in the spiritual life too. That the more you put in a balanced discipline, but a steady one for prayer and for spiritual reading and for the sacraments and for some spiritual fellowship with others, the more you put that in, the stronger you get, and you find, surprisingly, that you're more productive in other areas.
Because it sort of spills over, the graces of God. Mass attendance, was it low when you first started the experiment, so to speak, and how much has it changed over the years?
Well, it was very low. The daily Mass was held in the side Eucharistic chapel, which only seats, 40, 30-something, 30. And otherwise they could go to Mass in the friary, which had a small chapel too. But happily, we have now using the full chapel and having it basically full 3 times a day. And
3 times a day on a college campus, kids
yes.
going to Mass. And
they
this is a chapel that holds some 500 or 600 people, or 300 or 400?
Yeah, 300 to 400 in that area. So about 300 are definitely there every day. You have one expandable unit over into the Eucharistic chapel, and Mass has become just the way of life, yeah.
A way of life. That's exactly what it should be. We're going to go to a short break, Father Mike, but when we come back, we're going to talk some more about how to make Mass going, prayer, all the disciplines of the Catholic Christian a way of life. Don't go away. We'll be right back. We'll be right back with Father Michael Scanlan. Welcome back to Prepare the Way. I'm your host, Martha Fernández-Sardina, on the campus of Fransican University of Steubenville with a very special guest, Father Michael Scanlan. Father, this is such a beautiful thing that has happened over the years here at Franciscan University. And for those who want to learn more about how the Lord called you to your own vocation to the priesthood and to this university, they can read this fine book, Let the Fire Fall. But right before the break, we talked about how Mass attendance has increased and the chapel's filled 3 times a day. What other things have you seen over the years that have really built up the life of the student body? For example, attendance at confession, adoration of the Blessed Sacrament.
Right. Adoration has been so embraced by the student body that we've had no difficulty at all covering 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. Adoration, and it's never just down to 1 or 2, you know. In the early days, when we started, I was concerned, so whenever I'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd go out and double check that, and there always were a couple of people there praying. It was amazing to see how well they responded to adoration, being present to Jesus. When I have alumni reunions, I frequently ask, what's your fondest or best memory of your time here? Overwhelmingly, a great majority say it was time in the Portiuncula at adoration. Now, there's also a special thing that happens there. A tradition grew up, a proposal of marriage there.
Oh, really?
Yeah, where so people would decide on what God wanted for their life, decide on their vocation, but they also, for a number of years, that would be the favorite place where the man would invite the woman to come to adoration and then propose that they get married there. And then there'd be a group waiting outside to kind of
that's great.
cheer them on. But they have seen it as life-changing spot to be there in communication with the Lord and asking, you know, what does God want from my life?
And it's no surprise because prayer is life-changing. It's the
Yeah.
encounter with the living God who changes our lives from the inside out. And of course, the Portiuncula is a replica of that little chapel of the same name, the Portiuncula, that St. Francis preferred above all other places, and which is now has always been in the city of Assisi in Italy.
Yeah.
And special graces happen
And
or are given there.
some of our people always kid that we have the original because the original is in a big basilica now.
Yes, it is.
Whereas we were able to use local stone cutters and people to build it like Francis.
Yeah, he rebuilt it with his
Course,
hands.
like that he had as, and I think our students relate to that.
Now, the vocation to marriage is by far the most common vocation
Yes.
that God calls people to. But there's also there are men and women who are called to the priesthood, in the case of men, the permanent diaconate, or men and women to the consecrated life. Have you seen over the years a good response to those vocations?
There's just a tremendous response to the idea that God calls you. And that if you pray, and listen, you can know where you're called, and it's no longer, I fell in love, or something, but rather, I believe this is what God wants for me. And that has so deepened that we have been told by many bishops that we're producing more vocations to the priesthood and the sisterhood and brotherhood than any other college or university that they know of. Yeah.
I think that's beautiful, Father, because these are the formative years when you go off to college or even when you're in graduate school. Those are the years of decision-making for most everyone. And a very important decision in our life is, what is God calling me to be? Even more importantly than, what is God calling me to do? And you actually have a book that you've written, What Does God Want? A practical guide to making decisions. This is very helpful for people who want to know, what does God want me to do and to be?
It is very well used on campus because knowing through the simple process of prayer and the kind of discernment that has been passed down through the church over the centuries, that yes, I'm called to. Married life, priesthood, sisterhood, missionary, whatever, is very freeing for anyone to know where they're called, because God will give the graces for anything that he calls you to, and they get the confidence of that.
And it may not be easy at times, right? You were engaged to be married. You were in the Air Force. I'm sorry. You were a law student. You became a lawyer.
Yes.
You had a lot going for you, and then God has this great idea. I'm going to call him to be a Franciscan and a priest. Was it easy?
Well, on one hand, of course, it wasn't easy practically to think, because here I was supposed to get married, and I had a job waiting for me on Wall Street with a law firm, and my family was looking forward to me as a successful lawyer, so I knew there were those impediments. But on the other hand, once I experienced God, once I heard him say, first, Michael, will you give me your whole life? And then when I started to pursue that, and one day when I become fully qualified as the lawyer, passed the bar and all the things you need to be certified as a judge advocate, I just knew it was time, and I went and I knelt down in the barracks, and I just said, what? And that's all the prayer was, what? And I sensed God saying deep and powerfully within me, be a priest in community. And I said, okay. And I just knew it was God. I had been following him in little ways, and now this was the same voice that was calling me there.
Father, I like the way you said that I had been following him in little ways. I will say this, you wouldn't possibly say that so as not to draw attention to yourself, but you had been following little ways, but God had something big, something major in store to use you as an instrument, and you've been a very good instrument. How is it that we can be called to do great things for God and yet remain humble, remain little?
Yeah, well, as you say, the little things. How does he want me to pray every day? And, I heard the call to pray, spend an hour in prayer, to go to Mass every day, to do different things in confession, communion, and you get the sense that God is present and that he's affirming what you're doing, and you get a hunger to do everything according to what he wants, and have confidence that he will bless it as long as he called you to it. And so that was key in my life, of just saying, what? And then sensing within me, with that same sense that I had of God when he wanted to call me to daily Mass or to Rosary, or to different things, or not pursue marriage, those things, now he was calling with a little more emphasis and strength to where I should go.
And I imagine that this what is an ongoing, it should be, would you say, the attitude of every Catholic Christian disciple, to always say, what, Lord, what now?
Yeah.
I used to say often, when something would change that was not in my plans, I would immediately say to the Lord, what are you up to, Lord?
Yeah.
Is that the attitude that we must continue to have until the day we meet him face to face?
Right. We're disciples. And what does the disciple do? He goes to the Master and asks. And that's how the first disciples were sent. Jesus went and prayed, then he called them and told them specifically where to go and what to do. And he still will do that for us. We may not get every answer right away, and frequently that's because things have to change in our lives or circumstances before we get it. But God will direct us. He will lead us forth.
I believe, at least in my life, I'd love to hear your thoughts, that sometimes, in fact, he doesn't give it all laid out, lest we become the owners of the dream, lest we become the owners of the plan. I think he, a lot of times, wants to give us little pieces so that we continue always to walk in faith.
That's true. There's always something more that you're depending on God to provide or show. We never become fully actualized in possession of our future in all our circumstances.
Otherwise, we might want to be the owners of our future.
That's right.
I don't know if you would agree with this, Father, but I'd love to hear your thoughts as a man, a spiritual man, a man of prayer, a humble man. How do we keep humility the greater we become? You've done great things for the Lord. There are many men and women in the Catholic Church who are doing great things. How do we remain little, humble, the greater we become?
Well, it's in prayer, before God, where we grow in understanding that all the blessings started with God, and that we're just the recipient or the passer-ons of them. And in fact, the more that he does through us, the clearer we are that it's God, and that we have to depend on him, go back to him, be grateful to him, and that's where we get the direction for our life. That's why I wrote the book, What Does God Want? That's the passage to freedom. If you do it because God called and God blesses. Well, you can't take all the credit if it's his call and his blessing that enables you to do it.
There's very little credit we could take, actually.
Yes.
I agree with you. And I'm glad that you bring this up, because we live in a personality cult culture, and we have to be very careful, because it can creep in even to the church if we're not careful.
Oh, sure. You can. The compliments you get should lead you, as one good friend of mine, a preacher, said, before you go to bed at night, you've got to settle accounts with God. And you pass on to him the compliments you got and the successes, because it was his grace and his blessing that did it. Here it is, Lord, I was just holding it to give to you, You are the source of it.
Otherwise, we would fall into the error that the donkey that was leading Christ in to
like
Jerusalem may have, when they were all the accolades and the palm branches, and the donkey could have thought, hey, look at me.
Yeah,
It's not about
they're
you
doing
and
it
me.
for me, right?
Yes.
And
It's about the Lord. Father Michael, you have, I think, 16 or so books
Yes.
that I want to recommend. Some, Healing Principles, Deliverance from Evil Spirits. We mentioned this one, Knowing God's Will, The San Damiano Cross, The Truth About Trouble. A lot of people have a lot of trouble in their lives, and many more books that we will make available on our website for all those who would like to read some of what you've written. Thank you for who you are. Thank you for what you've done for the church all these years, and for the things that you will still do until the day the Lord calls you home.
thank you, Martha,
Thank you for being
an
with us
evangelist
today.
and going forth with power to serve the Lord and God's people.
Thank you. Father, you and I close our respective shows with the same blessing
Yeah.
from the book of Numbers, but I can't do what you can do, which is
Okay.
actually bless the people of God. Would you close for us?
May the Lord bless you and keep you, show his face to you and have mercy on you, turn his countenance to you and give you his peace. May the Lord bless you, he who is Father, Son, and Holy Spirit. Amen.
Thank you. Until we meet again, friends, stay tuned for more programming on Prepare the Way.